All right, class, quiet down. Let me just get set up here. Got a really great presentation. It's fine, it's fine. That goes like that. Okay. Perfect. Fairing, F-A-I-R-I-N-G, fairing, that's what we're doing today. Fairing is when you have a surface, you remove the low and high spots to get a really nice smooth surface. I did this when I was a kid on sailboats to make the hull nice and smooth. We're gonna do that today with 3D prints. Let me show you what I mean. When we 3D model a surface, we imagine that it's nice and smooth. In fact, the model is nice and smooth. But in reality, when we print it on an FDM printer, there are layers. In this case, these are 0.2 millimeters thick each layer, and they are rounded. So the surface, when you run your hand along it, goes in all of these little grooves. And if we want the surface to look nice and smooth, we either need to fill those grooves or remove them. What I like to do, the first thing I do with a 3D print is I sand away the high spots. That way, there are no more gaps, there are no more grooves. You could instead fill those gaps in, and there are ways to do that. You could use a filler primer, I'll show some of that later, or you could use an epoxy, and it makes a coating over your entire print, thus removing those gaps. We're gonna do some sort of combination of these two things to get the surface of Bender's car looking really, really smooth. But like I said, I like to attack it with sandpaper first. Remove all the high spots, or as many as I can, before we start doing any filling. Let's get to it. Chew! The time has come for me to finally fair the body of Bender's little car here. Time to do some sanding. I'll be honest, I've been putting it off. Actually, last week we weren't even here. We were in Austin, Texas filming with our buddy Brian Brushwood, which was super fun. But we're back now and it's time to get momentum on this project again, which means sanding. There are a few ways we can attack this sort of first round, getting rid of those layer lines. Of course, just sandpaper works. I have 100 grit on this sanding block. I could just attack it until it's gone. You can also use a card scraper. This is used in woodworking a lot. You build up a little burr on the edge of this piece of metal, and you can use that to scrape away your layer lines. This will probably be useful for going into these corners here where I really can't get in with a sander. The sandpaper isn't going to quite get in there. But my favorite option for doing the first round, of course, is powered sanding. And I have a random orbit sander that I'm going to use just to knock down all of the layer lines. There are some other spots like this groove here that is a little lower than the rest of it that I'm going to have to be a little more manual with. But for now, just going to go make some dust until most of it is as smooth as possible. Let's head over to the dirty side of the shop to take care of that. Treat yourself to fresh sandpaper as often as possible. Makes work so much quicker. 100 grit, ready to go. Got my dust mask. Let's make a mess. Well, we've done the bulk of the sanding. The rest is going to be a little more fiddly and by hand. The goal with that work is to get rid of all the high spots. And with a 3D print, you can tell which spots haven't been hit yet because they're still shiny. You can see this shiny corner here. I wasn't able to reach that with the random orbit sander. I'll have to come in by hand, but this gives us a pretty good idea of what's left. Also in these creases here, those I wasn't able to touch. I'll have to go in with some sandpaper and manually clean those up. Like I said, that card scraper can be super handy for getting down into corners. And you're basically scraping away the layer lines down here. I can use the pointy bit of this thing to get right down in that corner and slowly get rid of those layer lines. If you don't have one of these, you can just do what I do most of the time and fold up a little piece of sandpaper and go nuts. Got all the rough sanding done. I just have a paper towel and some alcohol, and I'm wiping the surface down mostly to get rid of any of the dust that's left over. Next thing we're going to do is some filling. I want to make sure that it's going to be going down, the body filler is going down on just bare plastic. We don't want any dust to get trapped under it. What we're going to be working on with the body filler are the large imperfections. This crease right here, this low spot, but there's also some spots on the seams I could use a little bit of filling. Right there. And then also right here, just the way these were printed, there's a huge amount of stair stepping. We'll see if we can fill some of that in. For the filling, we're going to use a body filler. This is normally used on automotive type work, which is exactly what we're doing today. And it's a two-part system. You mix some of this with some of this, and it makes a resin that hardens over time. It's also a polyester, so I'll have a respirator on, I'll have the door cracked, I'll have a fan going. You don't want to breathe this stuff in. Let's mix them up and get to filling. So I'm adding this to a low spot and filling it in, and we'll come back and sand it later. But you have to add more than you need. We got all our spots covered now. We just have to let this cure. It takes about half an hour, maybe a little longer. Then we can get back to sanding. Our body filler has cured, and I like working on a silicone mat like this because once it's done curing, you can peel it off and use it again. Ta-da! We also spent a little time sanding all of the little parts, the headlamps, the windshield, and the hubcaps. Just down to 100 grit. Everything will get primed in a little bit, but before we do that, we need to knock down our body filler. Like I said, we put on more than we need, and now we're going to sand it back down, and there will be a little left just in the low spots. We're going to do this with the palm sander. Well, that palm sander did a lot of good work. It just can't get down into some of the crevices, so I've got to finish those off by hand. But you can see the spots where the filler is remaining. That was filling in a low spot right there. So that'll stay there. And we'll just knock down the high spots with our sandpaper. I've wiped off the surface again, and now we're ready to start priming. And this is specifically a filler primer. It's designed to build up some of the surface, and in our case, it's going to fill in any of the tiny imperfections. Things like smaller than a 1/16 of an inch, really, really tiny things, scratches, and any of the pesky layer lines that might still be around. This will take care of it. I like sanding before I put on any sort of primer. The 3D printed material, especially when it's shiny, things tend not to stick to it. So I like to hit everything with 100 grit before I do any sort of priming or painting so that it's got some tooth to grab onto. We've prepped all of our parts so that we can easily paint them and easily let them dry. We even have an overturned trash can to set our car on so that we can get all the way around it while we're painting. Let's head outside and do some spray painting. It's a new day, my primer is dry. I ended up using the entire can and just covering this, probably 3 good layers. Really wanted to saturate the whole thing and fill in any imperfections. And now, with everything the same color, we can really see the surface and figure out where it needs a little more work. For example, the seam that was right here is completely gone. I'm really happy with that. However, over here, I can still see a little bit of a seam. So I'm gonna have to do some filling, probably with a spot putty. And then there's a little bit of a raised part down the middle of the hood here. I have to decide how much work I want to put into fixing that, but I may have to add a little more of that body filler on either side just to build it up and sand it smooth. Again, I need to sleep on that and decide how much work I want to do. But the rest of these parts are ready for sanding and priming and then eventually paint. I'm using 220 grit now, and I'm just sanding away all the texture until it's nice and smooth. The filler primer is designed to be very sandable, very easy to sand. So once you've got to this stage, it becomes a lot less painful. But also from this point forward, I'm probably only going to be hand sanding my parts. And we'll work our way up the grits eventually, probably to like 400. I need to figure out how glossy I want the car body to be. Most cars have that automotive glossy finish, and I might go for that on this. If that's the case, I need to make sure I get these parts super smooth. In fact, what do you think? What sort of finish should this car have? It's going to be a dark blue color, but what should the surface look like? Glossy, matte, satin? Same with Bender's head. I was thinking he would be a flat gray, even though he's technically shiny. In the show, he never looks shiny. He's always a flat color. So what do you think? What should Bender in his car be, shiny or matte? I really have no idea what I'm gonna pick. I do know that I need to keep sanding all these parts. So I'm gonna keep at it, keep sanding these parts, and we'll check in another week or so and see how Bender's going. I do have to start designing his head. I've been putting it off because it's gonna be a technical challenge, but it's just about time. That'll wrap it up for us in the shop today. I'm having a blast with this project. Hopefully you're having fun following along. Remember that we've got a bunch of stuff for sale over on our website, punishprops.com/shop. We've got Foamsmith books, 3D print files, premium video content, and what else? We have one more thing. And knives. Thanks, Britt. We have a ton of knives. punishprops.com/shop. Thanks for watching, and thank you to the members of our Extra Credit Club, those fine folks who contribute to what we do over here using Patreon or right here on YouTube memberships. Can't do it without you. Please keep that up. We'll see you in the next build. More Bender.
More sanding.
And more sanding. Never not sanding. Ow! 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 Ow!